From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Tourists love the sight of a moose. Their long noses, large sloping antlers, and gangly legs. But Rocky Mountain National Park biologists say the growing moose population appears to be harming wetlands in the park. That's according to a recent story in the Fort Collins, Coloradoan. And state wildlife officials say they also want to make sure a moose boom doesn't threaten the willows, aspen, and other plants that moose feed on in wetland areas. It's a big shift from a half-century ago when there were basically no moose in Colorado and wildlife managers introduced them. So we thought we'd check in with the man who oversees the state's population, which now numbers 3,500, and ask him how officials keep the size of the herd from overwhelming the habitat, or overbrowsing, as wildlife officials might say.
We definitely want to make sure that our aspen and willow communities are not overbrowsed.
That's Colorado Parks and Wildlife Big Game Manager Andy Holland. He told me about how the state's moose population has changed since it was introduced in 1978.
They're expanding and pioneering into new habitats, and they're essentially telling us where they like to be. And most of that population increase that I mentioned earlier is as a result of that pioneering and expanding into new habitats, rather than increasing in the places where they've been for 30 or 40 years. They've been relatively stable or only slightly increasing in northern Colorado, for example.
Andy, can you give me a visual of how moose browse and forage in these wetland areas? Can you give me an explanation of why biologists are concerned about the wetland areas they're affecting?
Sure. They can eat everything from like aquatic vegetation, they'll stick their entire head underwater.
Whoa.
To willows, where they will grab the willow branch and strip all the leaves off the whole branch in one motion.
Now, scientists with Rocky Mountain National Park feel that the moose are starting to overwhelm the ecosystem. Do state parks and wildlife biologists agree with that assessment?
There are a few. We have 14 moose herds in the state, and there are several of those that are above their herd management plan population objective. And in those areas, we use big game hunting, which is our best tool for managing populations and habitat.
Okay. And just so you know, we'll probably come back to hunting licenses again.
Okay.
Andy, I want to talk about the backstory of the moose population in Colorado. Moose were actually rarely seen in northern Colorado's mountains until relatively recently. It was in the 1970s. 24 moose were transplanted into North Park. That's an area around Walden on the north side of Rocky Mountain National Park. Why did this transplant happen?
Yeah, we transplanted moose into Colorado for two reasons: for hunting opportunity and wildlife viewing opportunity.
So it wasn't to restore moose populations to Colorado or anything like that?
Well, that too. But I think, as you mentioned in your intro, the scientific record indicates that there were not breeding populations of moose in Colorado. There were definitely moose in Colorado. There were moose harvested and moose sightings. But there's not really any evidence of breeding populations.
Yeah, it sounds like they might have occasionally passed through the area, but there really weren't moose living here full time. Andy, why have they been able to thrive here in recent decades?
I think what the moose have shown us is that we have excellent moose habitat. And so the idea of a transplant of moose to Colorado, I guess, is somewhat justified in that they've done so well.
Colorado reintroduced wolves not too long ago. I'm curious how you think that will affect the moose population.
We'll need some time to tell. Wolves definitely will prey on moose, but they prefer to prey on elk. In northern ranges such as Canada and Alaska, wolves are the primary predator of moose, but they need larger pack sizes to prey on a moose because moose are large, formidable, and can be dangerous if you're trying to grab a hold of one's leg with your mouth. And so they definitely will prefer elk as prey.
The plan since introduction in the 1970s has always been to let hunters limit the population. Why hasn't hunting alone been able to keep the numbers in check?
I would redirect that question a little bit. Hunting has been able to keep the numbers in check. We have a lot of tools at our disposal. And as we've talked about, hunting is the best tool for managing moose. We have high demand for moose licenses. We can harvest as many moose every year as we feel like we need to harvest.
And how are you altering hunting restrictions, if at all, to address the current moose boom?
New for this year, we added new late cow seasons in Middle Park and North Park, a couple areas that we have more moose than we like, and we're trying to reduce those.
And when you say cow season, what does that mean for a non-hunter?
Yeah, female moose
Okay.
are called cows.
Great.
And female harvest is the tool that we use to adjust population size. And if a population is above its population objective, we'll add female licenses. And in that time that moose have expanded and increased over the last 15 years, we've increased female moose licenses by 5-fold. So I would say we are on top of it. Some of the statements maybe that you're referring to came out of Rocky Mountain National Park, where there's no hunting allowed within Rocky Mountain National Park.
Is this a popular animal to hunt? Like, it sounds like people are quite interested.
They are, and bull moose are our hardest license to draw in Colorado, and it's once in a lifetime upon harvest.
What do you mean it's once in a lifetime?
If you harvest a bull moose, you can never apply for a bull moose again for the rest of your life.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that's just because there's so much demand. We have 60,000 applicants for 660 licenses.
Well, lastly, Andy, I know you want to warn the public about how aggressive moose are, especially mothers with calves. So people should definitely be careful not to disturb a moose, keep your dogs on leashes. And on that note, we want to make sure people can identify the sound of a moose. So I can't let you go today without asking you to do your best moose call.
Well, like you said earlier, everybody loves moose. And so I got a chuckle when that was the topic you wanted to talk about. But I want to make sure that people don't let that fool you. Yeah. They're the most dangerous animal in Colorado, especially in May and June when calves are born. Cow moose will aggressively defend their calves. Stay back and keep your dogs on a leash. They're no joke. They're very dangerous and aggressive.
So is it helpful to hear what they sound like?
I can give it a shot here.
Okay.
So a lonely bull in the rut sounds like this.
Okay.
And an interested cow sounds like this. So there you have it.
I feel like I'm there watching right now. Thank you. Amazing. Andy Holland is Colorado's Parks and Wildlife Big Game Manager. He talked with me about the 3,500 moose that live in Colorado. We'll include some links to more info about moose in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thank you so much for listening.